All right, for those who are in attendance from the public, we're finishing up the agenda on the Regional School Committee. If you saw it on our website, we're on the new business, and we discussed in executive session new business on amendment to the Assistant Superintendent's contract. We made a couple of errors. We ended up taking away errors. Now, the discussion should be in public, I guess, on what those errors were. And so if there's any question on the errors on the Assistant Superintendent's contract, you could ask at this time. If not, we're going to be... You can. Emily, grab that. Emily Dwyer is going to summarize the issue we had.
Better? Yes. So the school committee's role is not to evaluate the assistant superintendent, only to evaluate the superintendent. So that was something that got changed in section 14.0 under evaluation to switch the goals being submitted and the evaluation being taken care of by the superintendent rather than by the school committee. And that's...
So we're out here to, actually, we looked at it, we're all in agreement. We struck it from the records because it was incorrect. By law, the superintendent evaluates the assistant superintendent by mass law. So, do I have a motion on the floor? We got a move, second, discussion on the motion. All those in the school committee that, okay, to correct the problem, so moved. And now on the new business that we're bringing to you, I'm going to turn this over to our new superintendent, Dr. Justin Bartholomew, on this potential real estate purchase. Dr. Bartholomew?
Thank you, Chairman Adams. A couple of weeks ago, a gentleman approached me. Apparently this has happened in the past as well. 30 Main Street, the acquisition of 30 Main Street. We have a diagram here on the table. You can look at it. But basically, it's a property that divides up the fields in the front where the practice football field is with the lacrosse and field hockey fields, and it splits those two. The gentleman asked if the school district would be interested in purchasing it. The school district has consistently been interested in purchasing that property. And so we had conversations. We ran it through the state legal potential as well as our own attorney to make sure that was something we could do. It is. We are figuring out there are pieces we would have to do with, work out with the town of West Newbury, just to inform them, and possibly a vote in West Newbury. So at this time, Mr. Chairman, we are looking for a vote whether or not it would be permitted. Or you can go ahead and make that motion.
All right, do I have a motion on the floor? So moved. Second. Discussion on the motion to pursue taking a look at the purchaser's property. No discussion. All those in favor? Against? So moved. That brings us down to D, the joint meeting with the school building committee and the school committee. And now I'm going to turn this over to Jonathan Seymour, our chairperson of the building committee. Jonathan?
Thank you. Thank you, Wayne. So hi, I'm Jonathan Seymour, chair of the building committee. And I just want to go around and acknowledge the members of the building committee that are here in attendance, and then we'll proceed. So this committee has some school committee members on it and then some members of the public. So I'm looking down the table. I see that Dina Trotta is here, Emily Dwyer, Joanna Blanchard, Wayne Adams, Justin Bartholomew, myself, Kim Jackson, Joe Terisi, Glenn Kemper, Angus Jennings, Stephanie Seeley, Mike Stevens, and Greg Tosin, all members of the committee that are here. So the building committee's agenda for tonight is the selection of the preferred option. And so when we got to this point, we've asked our designer to just give us a kind of a brief reminder of what those options are to get the conversation going. And then ultimately, our purpose tonight is to vote to select which of the preferred options we're going to move forward with in the PSR portion of the project. So this time I'm going to turn it over to Brad, and I'll hold this one just in case there's questions, and you can use this one. There you go. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. So tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to give, as you said, a brief presentation, primarily a regurgitation, but somewhat abbreviated, what we had on the July 24th meeting, where we had, I have to say, an exceptional turnout. I think we had about 120 plus people, or more than that. So I thought that was really good, showing some enthusiasm. But our job tonight is to go and select the preferred option from the shortlist. So we've been for a number of months going through what the various options, oh, we lost it. Uh-oh. Yeah, that's in. We don't need to see that. Or that. There we go. Now we're back. So what we're going to do is we're going to select the preferred option tonight. That's everybody's job. Well, it's still not there. It's live there, but it's not on my... I don't know. It's hard. It could be the heat. What about, yeah, you can go down there. Try that. Yeah, you got it? Yeah. So a quick overview on agenda is we're going to take a look at where we are in the process, and then we're going to go and have a very abbreviated review of the options, and then we'll talk about schedule. Okay, one more. So as we've shown you before, this is representative of the MSBA modules. Modules 3 and 4 is a very prescribed process. We're at a point right now where we're selecting the preferred option, which is going to conclude the feasibility study phase. And once we have that completed, then we will move into actually doing the schematic design associated with the project. So originally when we submitted our PDP, we went from the many to the few options, and we submitted that as the PDP and then went and provided that to the MSBA. The MSBA came back and said, that was good, but we'd like you to take a little bit more of a deeper dive and take a look at, 3 more options associated with just the high school. And so we've done that, and that's what we've been presenting for the last 2 or 3 meetings. Today, again, we're going to go and select, from the 7 options that we have down to the 1. Anybody have any questions in terms of process? I know it's hot, so we'll keep moving it right along. So tonight, what we thought is, having the benefit of gone through this a number of times with you, what we could do is we just start by looking at trying to go and analyze high school versus middle high school, because that's where a lot of the attention seemed to be. I think there was a general consensus, and when you looked at, what the numbers suggested and what the benefits were, most people seemed to be focusing on that and not really comparing necessarily renovation or repair. That being said, we still have all of the options here tonight. We're able to go through each and every one of those. So with that, we'll kind of go through a little bit of a cost-value discussion. So with respect to a high school versus a middle high school, really what we're talking about is we're taking a look at a long-term perspective or a long-term view versus perhaps a shorter-term view. And all of our analysis goes and looks at what if, we built a 9 through 12 or a high school today, and then for a period of 10 years, we went and put the middle school in abeyance and then came back and did that later, as compared to looking at the entire project and resolving all of the problems now. That's really the analysis that we're talking about. Okay, thank you. So just looking at the middle school, if we were to put the middle school off, right, all of the problems still exist. We're kind of kicking the can down the road a little bit. And this analysis really goes and says if we had some of those circles there that didn't have any color in them whatsoever, we'd be in pretty good shape. But as you can see, we really don't. And in fact, most of the time, it's trending towards the gray side, which means that we really have a lot of problems with the middle school. And I don't think that's anything new to anybody. We know that we also have problems with the high school. The middle school is a little bit newer, but those problems aren't going to go away either. And we're really here just talking about building condition. We're really not talking about educational programming and how we're going to teach our students moving forward. Again, this is an analysis just looking at, what the differences are between addressing the problem today versus putting that out 10 years. I won't go through all of these, but basically what we're talking about is that there's a lot more value in terms of the building itself, in terms of educational delivery, and what we're comparing this to is the upfront capital cost, and we'll go through that chart here in just a minute. Does anybody have any questions about the middle school, conditions of the middle school, or anything that, yeah?
So this obviously was a high school job to begin with. Why would it be a high school and not a middle school job to start with? Is it because of the population? You have more grades over there, or, you know what I mean? How is it weighted?
I was going to try to answer the question, but then your last statement made me think I don't understand the question.
So
Try, just restate it. So
is there more of a need on the high school piece of it to go for the project for the high school? Because that's what this was originally, right?
Right.
So I guess I shouldn't use the word weighted. Why is that more of a need than the middle school? So if there's a great need at the high school, I think there's equal need at the middle school.
Yeah. So, I think that's part of one of the points that we're trying to just address here is that there are significant needs at the middle school. We started down this road by doing an SOI for the high school. And once it got accepted, the MSBA said, look at the whole regional campus. Look at your 7th and 8th and see if this is an opportunity to address both buildings. So in the beginning of feasibility, there was a needs assessment. So we had all the contractors come in. They went through both middle and the high school just to get a sense as to where both buildings were. And that's really where all of those circles came from that assessment. And so it was through that we identified that, the systems in the middle school were likely, like the high school, trending in a negative direction. Like that the electric and all of those other systems were aging just like the high school were. So does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah, it does. I don't know how they pick one over the other when there's obviously, equal need in both places.
Yeah, I don't.
There's more of a population at the high school, I do understand.
Right.
that.
And when you say they pick, do you mean MSBA pick?
Well,
Or
whoever did, however it came about, before I was involved, I think.
right. So again, through that process, we got accepted. Our SOI got accepted, and we were brought into the process. And then very quickly, they said, look at both buildings. And this might be an opportunity for the district to address things that would kind of take a more long-term view.
And I think if you think about it too, right, you're on a fairly tight campus. So from MSBA's perspective, you have 2 buildings that even in their view, when they looked at them, they knew had problems. Yep. As part of the process, as I think Jonathan said, you can only submit 1 project. So to a certain extent, we were fortunate in being able to go and have them come back and say, hey, we know that the MSBA process and the SOI says submit 1 project. However, right, when we look at your particular situation, you have 2 buildings that are pretty close, you're on the same campus, they're about the same vintage, they have same problems. It's not that unusual a grade configuration when you think about middle high schools as compared to if you were doing, an elementary school and a high school.
A lot of districts do at the middle.
It's something that actually, it makes sense. And so they said, if you're going to do that, why don't you look at, the big picture, look at both, and ultimately, that's where we are today, being able to go and say, which one makes the most sense in terms of value. It's exactly that they were kind of pushing forward. What's the best value equation for the district?
Well, what I'm trying to do is stress the point that one is equally as important as the other. I mean, if just because it was a high school job and you see just a high school job up there, you don't want to lose sight of the fact that we're going to have to do something probably sooner than later with the middle school. So having that option for the high school, I just want people to know what they're getting or not getting out of that, or what they're going to have to do later. And when I say they, I mean we, us, all of us.
So,
Yeah, they as we.
so that's actually a really good segue when you look at this chart that's up there in terms of how do these various options address all of the problems. And just going through, starting on the left, the repair only, and again, it's a similar idea here. If you go all the way to the right, you see all of the circles are filled up, so that means we're doing better, versus here, if we have a circle that's empty, we're actually not doing as well. So the repair only, you can just look at that, you can see that it doesn't resolve as many of the issues that are there, okay, as you start to move towards the right. And the first, second, third, and fourth column are all dealing with the high school grade configuration, and then the remaining 4 on the right are going and looking at the middle high school option. We've also highlighted in the green, if you remember, those were some of the key values or very important points that were determined early on in the process by the committee, that these were things that we wanted to make sure that we dealt with as part of the school building program. So the educational program, obviously that's a very important part in terms of making sure that we have the right spaces, that we're teaching the right type of curriculum, and that the building can respond to that. We talked a lot about separation of the middle school and high school age students, right? Each option responds a little bit differently to that. It responds very differently depending on what you're talking about. And then we talked about phasing a lot, and the fact that, we've said 2 to 3 years of construction depending upon what the option is, and how's that going to impact the students when they're actually in the building and having to go through the phasing. And then we also talked about site improvements, because while we talk a lot about building, we also know that athletic fields, parking, site circulation, how do we deal with other site amenities is an important facet of the project as well. So again, when you move all the way from the left all the way to the right, where the last 3 options are new construction, middle high school, versus a repair only of the high school, this is that discussion we had about looking at high school only versus middle high school. So I guess I'd just like to ask, is there a sense of, looking at a middle high school versus a high school? How do people feel about that? Dina?
Middle school, high school. Middle school, high school for sure. And I think everyone might agree.
Well, I've had the pleasure of working with this design team when I was in North Reading, and the results were fabulous, and that doesn't even begin to describe the project from beginning to end. This is a huge opportunity that I'm hoping we do not turn our backs on. The state has promised somewhere between 40 and 52%, and this is Massachusetts, so don't count on the 52. It'll be closer to the 40. But that 40 is 10 away from 50. That's almost half. So this is a wonderful opportunity to have 2 state-of-the-art schools for almost the price of 1. That's a deal. I hope we don't pass by that.
Anybody else have any thoughts, in terms of a high school only as being something that would be preferred?
The thought process I had, and I kind of canvassed the 2 streets I live on, and the people were more concerned with the impact, financial impact. We looked at it, and the basic, if we get the towns to approve, say, the high school at X number of dollars, and you put it on a 20 to 30-year bond, and then all of a sudden, 10 years from now, when the middle school is the same age as the existing high school, you have to go back to the 3 towns again for another bucket of money. It seems more sensible to bite the bullet now and do everything. You're gonna have, there's no guarantee MSBA would be in for the money on the middle school 5 or 10 years from now, whereas they're committed now. That's it, thank you.
Okay,
Brad, I'll just add one little note to that. So like you mentioned, we had a great turnout on the 24th. Mr. Kelly did a head count for me. I think we were around 150 citizens came out. A pretty good sampling throughout our 3 communities. We asked people on the way out to just give us some feedback. Some great questions were asked, some comments were made. We went through and answered all those questions. We put that up on the website. And we also said, what do you think, to anybody who would answer the question, what do you think is the best solution? And overwhelmingly, it was the middle high school options, and in particular, the 3.3F again and again and again. And in terms of that exit ticket on the 24th, a few people didn't really answer that question, but everybody who answered the question said that they thought the best solution was one of those middle high school options. We also then created an electronic version of that survey and put that up on the website with the video from the meeting, as well as the slideshow. So anybody who missed it could go, they could look at the slides, watch the video, and they could also respond. And again, overwhelmingly, people responded to the middle high school options. And again, the most kind of the strongest response was for that 3.3F. So again, that's just what we were getting in terms of feedback from people who either watched or attended that July 24th meeting. And one other little note that I'll make, so one of the members of the building committee who couldn't be here tonight was Denise Demkoski, the finance director over in Groville, and she wanted me to share with everybody that she was as well a support of that 7 through 12, the 3.3F. So again, she couldn't be here to say that herself, but she wanted me to share that with the group. I think Emily had a comment.
Just on that note, I've heard a bunch of people have sought me out and mentioned that they keep calling it the Courtyard option. And tonight, before I came over here, I was over at National Night Out, so a bunch of people from all 3 towns, and several of them were like, voting for the Courtyard option tonight, right? And I said, well, we're going to discuss it, but that's what I've been hearing overwhelmingly as well.
So this analysis and this chart really talks about how well we did in each one of these options in trying to achieve all of the goals that we set for ourselves. And as you can see, 3.3F achieves more goals than any of the other options that we looked at. We also need to, as you were pointing out, we need to be able to go and look at that. Well, what does that mean in terms of cost? So if we go to the next slide, this is a breakdown, of the costs, as well as a little summary up above there in terms of some of the things that we just reviewed. And in the blue, right, it's talking about what the cost of the project is, the highlighted or the bolded, starting in column RP 1.1, the $73.2 million. If you go across there, right, so right here, that would be the district's share of the project that would be split between the 3 towns. And if you go to the green on the bottom, what that is that's looking at the district share, but it's looking at it in terms of if the middle school project were not taken on at the same time, going back to splitting the 2 projects up, and we push that out 10 years, that creates the obligation at some point of $41.7 million, which ultimately, at some point, we know that building's going to need to be dealt with. So our assumption has been that it would be 10 years out. We've included escalation in that. We've included pretty much everything that we thought, was appropriate there. The one thing that we didn't include is the cost of keeping that building going over the next 10 years. We couldn't actually understand what those costs might be. We didn't want, and I think the committee didn't want to, have somebody out there saying, well, you bag that a little bit, you put extra costs into that. So those costs are not included, so that's a very conservative estimate. So the green is looking at both costs as if the middle school were delayed. The blue is looking at the cost if you did it up front. And it's based on each option. So in the blue, for these ones right here, these first 4, those are high school only options. And then moving over to the last 4, those are middle high school options, which makes sense if you can see that the numbers here are the same. So ultimately, when you look at pushing that project out 10 years, what ends up happening is it becomes more cost-effective virtually every time to be able to go and take that on today. And what this doesn't tell us, because it's really focusing on cost, is the additional value that you're going to get during that first 10-year period because you have a school. It also doesn't address the risk factor, as I think someone mentioned, is you have to go back out to towns and get that $41.7 million and hope that that goes through again. It also, from a risk perspective, doesn't contemplate what the MSBA's policy is going to be 10 years out. We're all hopeful that the MSBA is going to be there, but we don't know for sure what's going to happen. So that's contingent upon the same assumptions that we have today, which we don't really know what those are going to be 10 years out, if the MSBA is going to be in the same business that they are then as they are now. Does anybody have any questions from a cost perspective on this? I know we've gone through this a number of times. Chris?
Hi. So last time I had asked you about this line item, the district offices, and I understand that because we would be tearing down the middle school and where the administrative offices are now, we would need to then establish some administrative offices. What I don't understand is where the 4.3 million, like I know that MSBA wouldn't pay for that, that's something that the towns would have to completely cover, but that just seems really high to me, and that's what I don't understand. And where does that number come from? And have alternatives been looked at that we have vacant space in the district that some offices might be relocated to? I just think that number to me, I don't understand it.
So we actually explored two different scenarios on this campus. One was to renovate the district offices in place and retain that part of the middle school for that purpose. And the second scenario was to look at an all-new construction, perhaps as something like a prefabricated or a pre-engineered solution. So what we did was we sat down with the district office personnel and did some programming activities to try to determine how big that space really needed to be. And then ultimately we went out and had that cost estimated, and that's where this $4.3 million number came from. What we didn't do was explored other locations around the district in one of the 3 towns for district offices. So I think it's safe to say what could happen if there's a question about that part of the project is that in the schematic design phase, we can revisit whether or not that's in or there's another solution for that, but we wanted to reflect what the current options represent with the district offices on the site with that $4.3 million number in there.
So I understand that, but I still think that number seems really, really high to me considering, for the most part, our district office personnel is pretty small. The space they take up right now isn't a lot of space, so to me that just seems really expensive.
There's about 16,000 square feet of space that they're occupying currently, including that boiler room that's actually serving the rest of the middle school. But in that scenario, the boiler room would have to stay to continue to serve the district offices. There are some elements that came out as part of that programming activity that aren't currently represented, some professional development space, some additional conference space. But we did go through the process of what do you need and what should we carry as part of that design effort. And actually that $4.3 million number is on the lighter side in terms of construction cost, dollars per square foot, than the rest of the project is because of how it's being proposed as a construction.
Am I correct in remembering that that would also include some kind of bathroom facilities? Because when you take away the middle school, there wouldn't be facilities to serve those fields? Or?
So the short answer to that is no. Those costs are reflected in the main project cost as part of the site amenities package. But good question.
And I guess one other thing, Chris, just to try and address your question there is, it is expensive to build today, but we can come back and look at that in terms of, you know, what might another option be, because it's somewhat distinct from the project itself, and the MSBA, you know, isn't looking to go and reimburse that. So if during, you know, the next several months somebody comes up with a better idea for that, that's something, you know, that we can look at. But You know, it's representative. As Jason said, we looked at and took a pre-engineered solution, which is about 25% less expensive than if we were going to go and build something, you know, as part of the high school project or the middle high school project itself.
So I guess my question would be, as you look at that $151 million, where would you rate that in terms of quality of a school? Is this like the Cadillac version, or is this the Chevy version? And when you get down to finishes and desks and computers and all that stuff, where do we fall in terms of, are we shooting for the moon and hoping to come in below this, or are we middle of the road?
Well, the answer to that is somewhat complex because we haven't done any design yet. So on a cost per square foot basis, you know, what we're doing is, and we did some benchmarking as to what we would typically expect in a 50-year building, which is an MSBA requirement, and what we would see as being consistent, you know, with other projects across the Commonwealth. So is it a Cadillac version? No, I wouldn't say it's a Cadillac version. Would I say that it's a building that is going to last for that period of time, is going to be what I think the community would expect? You know, Dick has some experience looking at, you know, when he was involved with North Reading, you know, Wilmington, some of the other projects that we've done, it would be in that same level, if you will. As far as, you know, furnishings, equipment, that's all included. There's an allowance that's allowed for that as part of the MSBA process, $1,200 for technology per student, same for FF&E, and that's what we're currently budgeting as part of this process. But we'll know, okay, with a great deal more specificity, what is actually in there as we start to go through that design process. And at the same time, we'll be starting to check what the costs of those are, trying to keep those in line with what the budget is today, so that when we go and have that estimate done at the end of the year, we're going to know exactly what that is and what those finishes are, what that level of quote-unquote quality is that you're talking about.
So that, the jobs that are below budget?
Sometimes.
And so what happens if the jobs are below budget? So we're at 151, the state gives us 95, and say we come in, like North Reading, with $5 million in budget. What happens to that $5 million?
So if you came in $5 million under budget, it depends a little bit on the construction delivery method, but the short answer is the MSBA is going to take their percentage of the savings back, right? And then you'll take those additional savings back, and what we would advise you to do is put that into contingency, right? Go through the job, and then at the end of the job, hopefully you'll have some savings left, and those can be distributed back to the town. That's what we would advise you to do, right? Keep that money that's in the project until the project's done. Because there are going to be unforeseen conditions, there are going to be change orders. You know, you've heard me give you this speech earlier, but that's construction. I mean, you know that, you're in that business. So that's something that, you know, we want to make sure that we have the appropriate level of contingency in the job. Does that answer your question?
Come back to my indoor track, and if we ever come in below budget, is that something that can like be hanging out there, that if money's available, that can get included?
So, you know, the indoor track discussion, and we've had that here before, it's not that it's not a good thing, because I think it's a great thing. It's just a question of, right, and based on the discussion that was had by the committees, is it the right thing to spend, you know, our dollars on? What we could look at is, you know, we talked a little bit about this, is potentially we can work with a structural engineer, see if there's an alternate opportunity for that, so that if, when the project comes in, I think we estimated the track at $4 million plus or minus, just based on how the MSBA counts square feet, regardless of how much it actually costs. Perhaps there's a way to go and look at that as an alternate, so that when we go out, you know, we hire, well, we'd be hiring the CM before that, but when we actually go out and get bid information in, if it looks like it's coming in under, and you have that level of savings, then maybe that's an opportunity to implement that alternate. Any other questions?
Thank you. So that was a great question about if we come in under budget, but what happens if there's escalation? I mean, is that a realistic scenario, or is it capped to the CM in some fashion?
So that's a good question. So the way that the budgeting estimating process works is we'll go through schematic design, which is a higher than what a typically industry standard level of schematic design would be. And then we're going to have two estimates done. We're going to have one that'll be performed by an independent estimator that the designer hires, and then we'll also, have the construction manager provide an estimate based on that level of design, and then both of those estimates will be reconciled. At that point in time, all right, if we're on budget or below budget, that's good. That's where we want to be. If we're over budget, then what we would end up doing is we would be implementing some value engineering options. And part of the process that we'll be working on through schematic design is to go and look at what potential value engineering options might be available. So Joe mentioned finishes. If all of a sudden we said, we had a certain level of finishes in there, for example, we had ceramic tile in an entryway versus VCT. That's something that, many times gets value engineered out of a project to save money. And there would be a number of those that we would be looking at both across the building as well as looking at the site. So that's the first level, to go and get all of that so it's consistent to the best of our ability, okay, on this, when we go and set this with the MSBA and ultimately set what the project budget is, because that's when we're setting it. We'll be setting it sometime in December. November, December, right? We'll be going through and having those discussions with the MSBA. And then in February, we'll be coming back to the town with the results of that. Here's what the project cost is, here's what the MSBA is going to reimburse, and here's what the various town shares are. And at that point in time, okay, we will have built in the appropriate levels of contingencies for an owner contingency, for an owner's construction contingency, for a construction manager's contingencies. There's 3 or 4 that are put into the project to be able to accommodate things like designer mistakes, because they're going to happen, unforeseen conditions, all of those types of things that happen in due course of construction. So everybody does the best job that they can. An escalation, by the way, to hit that point, is built into the project. So we would be looking at escalation to the midpoint of construction, so not just on bid day, but right out to the middle of construction, because they buy out the job, throughout the whole term. In the absolute worst case, and it happens, all right, what ends up happening is if that budget, because there's an escalation explosion or something like that, there's still an opportunity to take things out of the project, or they would have to come back to the towns. But that's not as often, okay? You don't see that very often, but it does happen. So our job is to go and look at contingencies and try and make sure that we can forecast those as best as we can. Any other questions?
3.3F is a new middle high school option where there's a 3-sided courtyard as one of the design features. It's an element in the design that helps indicate the separation between middle school and high school. We have those site plan diagrams as resources behind the show if we want to show them later. There you go. There you go. So that orange polygon represents what this option would look like in a site plan, and the courtyard that's being referenced is that slot to the back. So middle school is to the south, high school is to the north. The front door there is on the east side facing Route 113.
Route 113, Farm Lane.
Okay. And Brad, if I can add just one last point to the cost discussion. We want to be clear that tonight's vote is not about authorizing money, right? Tonight's vote is only about selecting the one from the few that we have, and we've done the best cost estimates that we can to give folks a sense of what that might be, but we won't know that number precisely until we go through the schematic design phase.
Are we still required to carry any options per MSBA? Like originally we had to do the high school repair only or whatever it was. Like can we choose one or do we have to carry another one?
At this stage, you must choose one, right? This is the final step in what we would call the feasibility study part of the process where you're going from the few that are left on the table to the one that you would like us to move forward in the schematic design process.
Any other questions on cost? I'm just going to give you the mic.
Thank you. So you guys met previously in one of the other towns, actually from Groveland, but it's convenient. So, but you didn't vote, it was just a public meeting, but tonight, I guess the folks on the table are voting, and only one option lives.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
When do we break ground?
It'd be about 18 months out, somewhere right around there.
I think that's what you said last one. 2 years. 4 months ago.
At least I'm consistent. Can we go ahead one more slide then? So again, going back to the same circle diagram, when we look at breaking the two projects up into middle school and a high school versus a combined middle high school, you can see there in terms of what we're getting from an educational perspective and the number of stars that are proposed, site amenities in terms of the number of stars that are proposed, and then overall dollars. So when you look at the cost, actually, you're taking $3 signs plus $2 signs is 5 versus 4. And when you're looking at the benefits that you receive, as I noted earlier, you're actually receiving those benefits up front, 10 years, as well as getting more of them in the, less of them in the separated version. Any questions about that diagram? Okay. So we'll go ahead and click it forward one more. One more. So now this is what we've been working towards for the past almost, 10 months, 11 months, something like that, as to making the selection that you want to have. Middle, high school, repair, renovation, addition renovation, or new construction. And all of those options were represented back in that chart. So we have two motions that we prepared that would be consistent with what the MSBA is looking for. One for the building committee, one for the school committee. And then we can go through all of those options. Okay, again, as much detail as anybody would like, we're ready to do that. But if the committees are ready to go, we're ready to listen.
So we have two committees, and both committees need to vote to approve this. So we'd like the building committee to make an approval first that can be recommended to the school committee. So I've been looking to someone on the building committee to make a motion. You can use the language on the screen and then plug in whatever option it is that you'd like. But if someone wants to go ahead and make a motion.
Mr. Seymour? Oh, sorry.
Or did you want to make the motion?
All right, go ahead, Dina, make the motion.
I can't read it. The Pentucket Regional School District School Building Committee, in conjunction with its review of Module 3 Feasibility Study Preferred Schematic Report, approves option N3.3F as the preferred option to be presented for further consideration by the MSBA as part of its PSR submission.
Second. Any discussion from the committee? Okay. All those in favor? This is just the building committee, school committee members on the building committee only. Thank you. Opposed? Unanimously. Thank you very much. Wayne, I'll turn it back to you.
All right, we're going to do the identical thing, and we're taking that vote into consideration in our vote. So Dina, would you like a repeat?
The Pentucket Regional School District School Committee, in conjunction with its review of the Module 3 Feasibility Study Preferred Schematic Report, approves option N33F as the preferred option to be presented for further consideration by the MSBA as part of its PSR submission.
We have a second. Is there any discussion on the motion?
I think, just for the record, I think Dina had said yeah, it should be 3.3F, N3.3F.
Everybody get that correction? All right. All those in favor, school committee, of the motion? Opposed? Carry unanimously. Back to you, Jonathan.
All right. So thank you very much, all the committee members in attendance tonight. Appreciate your support throughout this process. Jason, you have a question? Oh, just going to go through. Yeah, so we'll do that and then we'll conclude the meeting. You want to do that, Brad? Just a review of the schedule, upcoming meetings and upcoming events.
Right, so what happens next? We have one more series of votes to make it through. Dorn Whittier has been preparing the physical binder that goes into the MSBA that documents the decision that was just made. There'll be a vote to authorize that submission to the MSBA by these two entities on September 11th, and then we'll subsequently submit the book the next day. The MSBA will receive that and review it. There'll be a step where they actually authorize the project to move into schematic design. We expect that that board meeting where they'll take that vote is on October 31st. And then we will submit the full schematic design package that Brad mentioned a few minutes ago in January with the expectation that the MSBA will authorize the approval of that schematic design in February. And then the sort of most important date on that slide is that the town votes will happen at Springtown meetings in April and May.
Thanks. Jen Solis, Daily News. Congratulations to the committees for getting this far on your unanimous votes. I have just two questions, if that's all right. One of them is about the town votes, which I've heard different scenarios from different town officials and other officials, so I want to make sure I have it correctly. When you go to town meeting, is it a 2/3 vote or a simple majority? I know you have to pass it in all three towns. And when you go to the polls, I believe it's a simple majority. Correct. That's my first question. So correct? So it's not a simple majority at town meeting then?
2/3 at town meeting because you're incurring debt, and then a simple majority to authorize the raising of
Okay.
tax.
Terrific, thank you. The second question I had, and if it's not appropriate for me to ask this now, you can let me know, but I'm wondering, now that you've all supported this plan and you're unanimous, you're going to be getting out your supporters to promote it to the communities. And I guess I'm just wondering what message you want to send to folks who maybe felt it was too big a bite, it will be too big a bite. They understand the idea of short-term, long-term, but they're looking for maybe a short-term solution so that other things can go on for the next 10 years, such as, I know Merrimack is really also desperately in need of some public safety facilities. So what's the message that you are going to bring forth out of this meeting to the communities and voters on that? Thank you.
Well, so I would answer that by saying that ultimately that's going to be left up to each voter to decide whether or not they want to support it. For us, I think here it looks like it's been a unanimous vote. So the people who have done this work see the value in it, see the importance of it, and see the benefits that it will have of our children moving forward. I think the message we get out, I mean, the school is apolitical, right? School district's apolitical. We're not going to go out there and canvass. If parent groups are wanting to do that for or against a project, they certainly can. But I think the most important piece of this entire process is that people, when they cast a ballot, that they cast an informed ballot, that they understand what they're voting for or what they're voting against. And there's arguments to be made both sides. But I would say that the overwhelming, obviously you saw here that the people up here who have been working on this project. The unanimous vote for that building project really steps us in a step in the right direction for our children, which is always going to be our focus.
Thank you, Dr. Bartholomew. So at this point, for the building committee, a motion to adjourn. All those in favor? Okay, the building committee has adjourned. Thank you.
I'm going to ask the school committee to stay around for a few minutes. I apologize, I did make a mistake, error. I skipped our new business, Part C, school committee goals to the superintendent. And I just didn't want there to be confusion on your part on two sets of goals. I'm going to turn this over to...
Sorry, just before everybody goes, first, thank you to everybody here for coming out. I just wanted to thank Mr. Haddon over here and Mr. Shepherd. It's very hot in here. It's a quick change of venue, so thank you for everybody showing up. But these folks got the building set up, and just a huge appreciation for them putting this together because it was not easy to do. And certainly to Merrimack Schools for letting us use this facility this evening. But just wanted to give that quick shout out because I know they worked hard to get this going. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Bartholomew. Back to Part C, the reason several of you passed me in goals, and the confusion is goals we set for ourselves as opposed to goals we set to give to Dr. Bartholomew to work on for the year. Chris spearheaded it when the contract came up, and so the contract language looks like it's one but not the other, but I wanted Chris to weigh in on this so there is no confusion between the two sets of goals. The people who passed them into me thus far have passed in what would appear on our website from 2016 goals, and those are ours. Chris, could you weigh in for us, please?
When I recommended putting it into the contract, it was something that when I had discussions with Mike Gilbert from MASC, he said, well, we should be part of the superintendent's goal-setting process because the goals for his job, or her job, depending upon the case, should align with the district goals. But that to write it into the contract makes the timing of it appropriate so that we're not halfway through the year and then we're handed goals and then we vote on goals that we're not part of the process of coming up with. So I think that was my intent when I first suggested that we put it into the contract. When Mary Ann asked us to submit goals, I clarified with her and she said it was school committee goals, which should align, certainly, but it's kind of different because there's some things that we're not directly involved with. So professional development, I think that should be a goal for this year. We provide the funding for it, but the administrative team comes up with the plan that then we support the funding. So our goal would be to support administration in professional development, but then Justin or Brent's or whoever else's goals would be to provide professional development, blah, 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 however their plan is. So does that make sense? So I think in the contract we put that we would give Justin his goals before the school starts, which I don't know how we're going to get that done. So.
That was my thought, is so he could have in hand, and what she originally wanted in the contract is, if you remember, and you were on the school committee of last year, we handed them to the chairperson. Everybody had the opportunity, and we picked from the goals that were set forth from the standards of the state. And with that, we gave Dr. Mulqueen probably 12 to 14, of which he weighed in on. In our meeting in, I'm thinking May, I passed those all out to you because he did them himself to self-evaluate. So the difference is those goals we set for the superintendent as opposed to the goals we set ourselves. And to repeat what Chris said, and Dr. Bartholomew also agrees, they should indeed overlap and meld together. and her thought about we're not going to get them in time for the opening of the first day of school, yeah, we're going to be hard pressed, but well, you should have them shortly thereafter. The ones you passed into me are those same types of goals that are presently on the website that was put on in 2016. And if you get the Newburyport News, you'll see that the Newburyport School Committee are presently doing their goals as well. Chris, you had a comment.
Well, the ones that are on the website are old goals. Yeah, so you could use those, or I went and I just researched goals and I saw things in other districts that I thought we need to make important. So if anybody is not knowing what they might look like, I haven't seen the Newburyport ones, but they just came out, so.
If anybody would like to see the Newburyport News ones, I did cut it out so I can photocopy it and give it to everyone. And they are generic, as you would expect. A lot of them are broad spectrum, but, and our goals would be. The ones that would be passed in at a later date to our superintendent, a little more specific, because remember, there's 42 elements on that superintendent's evaluation, and we kind of narrowed down on the ones we wanted him working on that was most pressing for us, all right? So those goals will come at a later date. Any other questions you might have for anyone on this topic? Go ahead, Emily.
So
Right now, these really weren't the ones I was looking for. The ones I was looking for is the ones we could pass in to him before the start of the school, and that's why I wanted it cleared up. And we're going to be late doing it now. The ones that we've passed in are the ones that are synonymous to the ones that are on our website, our own goals. Those aren't the ones I was looking for. Okay, so we're going to be a little late for Dr. Bartholomew, and we're
just so everyone's on the same page, I'll just read to you on the part of the goals.
On your contract.
It says, prior to the start of the school year, the school committee will present to the superintendent the school committee goals for the upcoming academic year. The superintendent will subsequently present to the school committee his goals no later than October 15th. This date may be adjusted by mutual agreement in the first year of this contract. So and we can certainly go through and adjust that date. So for this, yeah, that is the goals of the school committee. Personally, I think a collaborative effort, and you all have been here. You know what you'd like to see, and you can go through that evaluation and pick out the areas, and then I will write those goals and submit them by that October 15th. So it's just kind of that two-pronged. But my goals and the school committee goals would dovetail together, hopefully.
Any more discussion? Because this isn't for approval, it was just information to be disseminated. So with that, do everybody in on the school committee that has a motion on the floor? We got a motion to adjourn, and we got a second from Emily Dwyer. Any discussion? All those who want to adjourn? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much for staying around, and I apologize for missing C again.